Welcome back, guys. This is Gaming with Alston, and today we're on episode 86 of Pyramid City. And today, on Pyramid City, I'm gonna try to finish all of this up. Imagine a wealthy family who spent a lot of money on food and refused to take their kids to the hospital or to the doctor. They'd be neglecting their child's health and well-being. Forcibly making your kids fat is not a good idea. Sometimes parents have to lock up all the food to prevent their children from becoming obese. I know, that's how some parents raise their kids. They put all the food under lock and key to make sure they don't become overweight. But the problem with that is children are growing. They are growing. So you gotta let them grow into their weight too. Weight gain during a growth spurt is actually completely normal. It is completely normal. It's completely normal to gain weight during a growth spurt. Because your body needs to produce ghrelin before it can produce growth hormone. Because your body cannot respond to growth hormone if it doesn't have the necessary nutrients. I believe that Adderall should be tightly regulated on the street. Like, all drugs, all the controlled substances should be legalized and tightly regulated. Kind of like the case of Portugal. Making drug laws more libertarian actually does work. Some of the stuff we take for granted can get you locked up in North Korea. Some of the stuff we take for granted include dirty videos on the internet. That's definitely illegal in North Korea. Dirty videos on dirty sites. Adults only sites. You know, it's not just overweight people that are subject to discrimination. Smokers are subject to social discrimination for the same reason. Yet the truth of the matter is, for overweight people, some of them just cannot help it. Obesity prevention might actually require more than just changing diet and imposing an exercise regimen. It might actually have to involve reducing the amount of air pollution we release into the atmosphere. Because, you know, air pollution might actually have a bigger role. The effects of the air pollution on your waistline might actually be transgenerational, meaning it might be passed on to your children, and maybe grandchildren. Which the only way to prevent the obesity would be to move out of the city into a suburban area, like far away from any factory. Because you can only do so much to get your child to eat less. There's only so much you can do. When women are exposed to testosterone in the case of polycystic ovarian syndrome, they end up gaining a shit ton of weight in a short period of time. That's actually due to a hormone called testosterone. Testosterone is known to cause weight gain. There's a video on the internet called "A Woman Suddenly Grew Her Beard. This is what happened to her ovaries." Yep, her weight gain was caused by polycystic ovarian syndrome. Polycystic ovarian syndrome. Some people are ordered by their doctors not to have any more kids. If your aversion to vegetables continues on to adulthood, despite your parents pressuring you to eat your vegetables your whole life, You might actually have your genetics to blame for that. You might have to blame it on your genetics. You might have your genes to blame for that. Your DNA. You might have to blame it on your genetics. For this one. It's not your fault. For all the children refusing to eat your vegetables, it's not their fault that they hate the vegetables. It's actually in their genetics. Because since they're growing, their bodies naturally prefer foods which they don't need to expend as much energy digesting, and foods with a greater energy density. If your child is suddenly becoming obese despite a healthy eating habit and exercising every day, you might have to blame it either on their genetics. I'll pause the video so I can bring my mom her drink. Your genetics might be the reason why. Genetics might actually be the reason why so many children hate vegetables so much. You might have to blame it on your child's genetics. Because it's not their fault they refuse to eat their vegetables. It's not entirely their fault. You might have to blame it on their genetics. Because your genetics have a bigger role in your food preference than you think. Because back in the Stone Age, when something tasted bitter, that meant it was poisonous. Probably poisonous. Some people don't have as much an aversion to bitter tastes compared to other people. If you want to treat hypothyroidism, you have to gain a lot of weight. Because those who are extremely skinny with hypothyroidism are more likely to suffer organ failure compared to the fat guys with hypothyroidism. What we need to do to prevent people from overfeeding children is, what if we, taxing the rich could be a solution to that. Taxing the rich and subsidizing the poor can help prevent obesity in the long term. Yet there are people out there who really need to eat a lot. Sometimes one's desire for money is driven out of a desire for a lot of food. Your desire to eat all the time might actually be due to your genetics. If your parents have that same desire, chances are you're going to have that desire even if you're given up for adoption early in life. For some people, their urge to eat is so great that they end up eating so much to the point their stomachs rupture. Especially in the case of Prader-Willi syndrome, if left untreated. If the patients are left to their own devices, they'll keep eating and eating and eating until their stomachs finally rupture. It is pretty sad to see that. Some of the heaviest children in the world have a medical condition called Prader-Willi syndrome. In Prader-Willi syndrome, food must be kept under lock and key. Food must be kept under lock and key to ensure not only they don't become extremely overweight, but to also ensure they do not eat until their stomachs rupture. Because left to their own devices, they'll keep eating until their stomachs have ruptured. It's a sad thing to see in those with Prader-Willi syndrome. If I had PWS, all the food would be kept under lock and key, but I don't have PWS. It is caused by a defect in the hypothalamus, which means it's a birth defect. Initially, it starts with hypotonia, which is why babies are oftentimes Prader-Willi babies oftentimes have trouble feeding or nursing. There's a lot of developmental delays associated with Prader-Willi syndrome. It is a genetic form of hypothalamic obesity. Left to their own devices, they'll eat until their stomachs have ruptured. It's a very cruel disorder to have. It's a good thing I don't have it. If I did, I'd have to live with my parents for the rest of my life. I'll never be able to live on my own, no matter what I do. Because I'd eat my parents would fear I'd eat myself to death. Like, until my stomach ruptures. It's a really cruel disorder. Some people have actually died as a result of Prader-Willi syndrome from ruptured stomachs. It's pretty sad. That people have to live with the starving hunger for the rest of their lives. Some people with... Just like how some people with autism will never be independent. sometimes due to eating disorders associated with autism, including anorexia and bulimia, as well as binge eating disorder. People with autism are actually at a greater risk of developing an eating disorder compared to general population, whether it be anorexia or bulimia, and or muscle dysmorphia. For me, I felt I was not lean enough. That drove me into becoming anorexic. Since I'm conserving energy for the winter, I'm only sticking to strength training for now. Then I'll go back to doing strength training mixed with cardio once spring begins. Once spring begins, I'd go towards doing full-on cardio, instead of just walking to and from the gym. The reason I need a gym membership is because I need to pack on muscle. And throughout the winter, I might end up having thicker and rounder looking muscles, because I'm not doing as much cardio. And sometimes a jacket just won't cut it if you're extremely lean. Even with thick layers of clothing, you're still going to feel cold all the time. I'll start doing full-on cardio whenever my cutting season starts. Right now, I'm in bulking season, where I'm bulking up. Where I'm packing on muscle. I'm determined to outcompete all the other bodybuilders when I go into pro bodybuilding stage. I'm gonna do this completely naturally. My goal is to try to become the best of the naturals. Like massive pecs, massive lats, massive legs, massive arms, and a tiny waist. Like how bodybuilding should be. When I start cutting down for competition, I'd have to eat a lot less, yet stick to very high intensity training. I know I might risk a bone fracture, but I'm willing to accept the risk of breaking my bones. Because I'll be cutting down for competition. In the weeks leading up to competition, I'd also be chugging several cans of energy drinks a day. In the weeks leading to competition. Because caffeine is a diuretic. Because caffeine is a diuretic. Mainly because caffeine's a diuretic. And I'd be drinking several cups of coffee, too, before her competition. Not have those round-looking muscles. Like, when March comes around, my muscles would be at their thickest looking. Kind of like Charles Dion McDowell's neck. Obergekopf. Eventually, I'd start doing the overhead press. Eventually. The overhead press. Overhead press. And as you get older, your likelihood of becoming overweight or obese actually increases as you get older. That is because your metabolism slows down as you get older. There's nothing you can do about that. Age is one of the factors of obesity we don't have control over. And believe it or not, you start taking part in the circle of life before you're even born. Anyways, this is Gaming with Austin signing off. Thank you. Stay tuned for more. For episode 86 of Pyramid City. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Gaming with Austin. And don't forget to follow me on Facebook. Like my real Facebook page. Like my regular Facebook page. Nah. Thank you for watching, stay tuned for more, and choose. And don't forget to support me on Patreon if you want to. If you want to, you can support me on Patreon if you'd like. And choose.